View from the Gutters, episode 98. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss Shudder, and to skip ahead to the recommendations section, skip to 13106.
We should get started, though.
Yeah, let's.
Welcome to View from the Gutters.
Yeah, episode 98.
Yeah.
We're closing in rapidly on 100.
Yes, and we've actually determined what episode 100 will be.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to tune in next week to find out.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't possibly count from 98 to 100.
No, I mean, like, what we're going to cover on
what we're going to cover.
having-
I thought you said when, and I'm like,
No.
pretty sure it's going to be
What?
easy to tell.
No, Brant,
weeks
math
from
and
now.
calendars escape us, so we just have to wait until it happens.
Okay.
It's now! It's happening now!
Just checking.
Anyway, I'm Andrew Chard.
I'm Tobiah Panchin.
I'm Kaylee Fleeman.
I'm Brant Gillihan Eddy.
And I'm Kevin Reynolds.
We're talking about Shudder this week.
We are.
We are.
Shudder Volume 1.
So I notice when I'm gone, there's no like elaborate conversation about cookie hell or cookie prison, jail, extradition, assassins. It's just, I'm gone.
You're just gone.
It's so
Well-
sad to me.
Next time.
I don't know.
Well, the thing is
I
that
think
there's
there
this-
was one time where it was like my ghost was on, but other than that, it's just like
I did, yeah.
no.
I may or may not have edited you into an episode that you weren't on, just for fun.
Well, the thing is that there's a story behind Cookie Hell, and we don't have a very good story about why you might be gone.
And when I'm gone, they just say that I'm dead in a ditch.
No, well, they did say that once.
And
But
they
also
don't
say
miss
you're
me when
cookie
I'm
hell.
gone,
They also
so.
said that you were an assassin. They get
I was an assassin once? I missed that.
the next time that you're not on an episode, I'll come up with something good.
You'll get to be a cool person.
I want a little story.
All right. We'll come up with a good story.
See, because unlike some people who aren't on the show currently, I actually do listen to the episodes, and so I want to know that I'm missed.
See,
Oh,
the worst
yes.
part is that he'll never hear you say that.
I know, except for the one time where he does listen to it, and then he'll be
Yeah.
like, "But I don't listen to it."
But I don't listen.
But
I
you
hear
just did.
everything you say
He's
about me,
just trying
but
to
I
be
don't
cool.
listen.
This is our opportunity to badmouth Joe.
What he doesn't know is that he spends his like what the fans don't know is that all he does is listen to the show on repeat. But he makes me edit out everyone else, so it's just him talking for days, and he'll listen to that. It soothes him.
It helps him
So.
sleep.
Yeah.
Well, see, what nobody actually knows about Joe is that when he sits at home, he's got music on or a podcast or something, and he's watching videos on YouTube on his laptop, and he's playing a video game
It
while he's also
drives me
cooking dinner and
crazy.
having a conversation.
That is actually the truth.
Yeah, it's
like
very
that's
true.
that's real. But I sympathize 100% because the only time I play video games really is while I'm doing something else. So when I edit the show, like that's when I get a chance to like tool around Skyrim as a dragon man. And like when I'm playing just the game and I'm not editing shows, like I have to start turning other things on because my ADD is too much. I get bored.
Which actually reminds
how can you
me because I
watch-
just got Skyrim for Christmas. Merry Christmas, everybody! Since this is going to be dropping
Oh,
on
yeah.
Christmas Eve.
Yeah, Merry
That's right.
Christmas.
Happy non-denominational gift-giving day to those of you out there.
Yeah, happy Hanukkah. This is over by now, I think.
Nope,
Yeah.
I think we
Or-
have 2 days left. Maybe it'll be over by the time
Yeah.
the show goes out.
Kwanzaa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa.
Festivus?
Festivus.
Your
rest of us.
winter solstice holiday of choice.
Yeah.
But specifically, since Christmas is tomorrow, Merry Christmas, and also all those other holidays that may or may not be going on right now.
Yes.
You went to a liberal school, Tobiah. You should know better to assert your holiday priorities onto other people.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no
Culture
problem.
war.
No.
Culture
Okay.
war.
I have
Here-
no problem exercising my Christmas privilege.
Take
Well, then
your-
maybe the people who were insulting Joe that one
Yeah.
time will come and understand that there are some conservative, heartfelt American values on this damn show.
Yeah, take your Yule tree outside and shove it up your butt.
guns,
That is what
freedom,
you do with a Yule tree.
democracy.
So at work, I always say happy holidays because, one, I don't give two shits of whether or not you have a Merry Christmas or not. And-
Kaylee's a bitter person inside.
Talk about lovable asshole.
But I say it because it's inclusive and it's not hard to be inclusive, right? Like it's changing Merry
Yeah.
Christmas to Happy Holidays. Not hard. And so I always get customers and it's always people who celebrate Christmas who get offended. And they're like, Merry Christmas. And to one woman, she was just pissing me off all day. I looked back at her and I said, Happy Hanukkah. I'm Jewish, which is a lie.
That's my favorite. I'll do that too.
It is a filthy lie. But the look on her face was thoroughly worth it. And I had to convince the woman who was in line behind her that I was in fact Jewish because she hurt me. And so I had to sell it.
And so you had to talk about dreidels and
and Hanukkah bushes.
Really looking forward to my gilt gefilt coins and my dreidel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gefilte fish.
light the Hanukkah candle menorah. The Hanukkah chandelier that sits on the table. No? Is that not what
God.
it? Damn it.
Yay.
I've blown it again. Play with my Hanukkah top. Shit.
Yay,
I know
unleavened
nothing.
bread. Bring on the wine.
That would be me. Anyway, yes. Happy holidays. We will be announcing what we're doing for the bonus episode 100, regularly scheduled. Next week we'll announce that. And
But yeah, for right now, we're talking about Shudder.
yes,
And you pitched Shudder, Chard.
I did.
Tell us about your thoughts.
Well, I was thinking about this today because, as I so often do in my mind, I just relentlessly criticize video games. It's basically like 80% of my thoughts throughout the day are just like, God, these games are garbage. Because I work in a place where like we sell video games, and so I see them a lot, and it just makes me think of like, people don't really give a shit about video games. They're just kind of like, oh, whatever the newest version of that one thing is, let's get that for our kids. And I think that it's something that I've talked about before on the show and on other things, but like something I'm really missing from video games, and that used to be there and that aren't there anymore, but that are very apparent in comic books because comic books are kind of like the medium for this one thing, is surrealism. Surrealism in comic books is a massive thing at this point, and I think that it's something that's really lacking in video games. They all want to be so grounded in reality, and they're so concerned with like the gritty realism of Grand Theft Auto and Battlefield and Call of Duty, and like there's a very specific niche of people that is overwhelmingly like the highest selling games in the community that are very much not surreal.
Well, certainly if you're talking about AAA, like
Right.
mainstream video
Yeah,
games.
and this is what I've always said. Like, you got great indie games that are phenomenally surreal. Minecraft being one of them in a lot of ways. But that's what this book brings to me. It's just a universe that is so surreal and so abstract, and also like it feels grounded. Like you can feel the reality of the characters in that world, but the world itself is so foreign to you, and just like. We don't get a lot of the day-to-day life. Like, this is very different from Private Eye in the fact that it's like, it is different from our future, but there's explanations for why people wear tiger masks and why they hide their identity and why the future is the way that it is, and there's no internet and there's no kind of cell phones and stuff like that because of this great, like, internet crash. But in Shudder, this stuff just happens. There's no explanation for why there are lion men in cars shooting guns at people. There's no
Or
the Richard
Flying Saucer Police.
the Richard Scary like assassin suicide bomber guy driving the Apple. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like it's just part of the world, and you're just immediately forced to accept it. And it reminds me of being a child playing an NES game and just being like, why the fuck are mushrooms flying at me and making me larger? And what is that? And what's that? It's a turtle with wings. And what is that thing? And you're a child. And so it's what you have, and you just kind of accept it. And I think that there's a beauty in that. And I think that that's one of the most striking things about this book for me. On top of the fact that it is like, I think the characters in this book are outstanding, and I think that there's a lot that we could definitely discuss about that. And I love the art so much, and the story keeps me absolutely riveted. But the setting is what drew me into this book. It's what's still so striking to me about this book, and it's what, I mean, this pushes all the right buttons for me in terms of like surreal, just abstract craziness.
Yeah, it's definitely super weird and reminds me in a lot of ways of the universe in Saga,
Yeah.
where they're just like, we're just going to throw things at you.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll get an explanation. Maybe that's just the way that things are.
And I love it. And
Somebody in one of the issues did a fan art of a lying cat with alarm cat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was cool.
And I think that this has a lot of crossover with fans of Saga for sure. And it's something that we talked about on Black Science. It's something that we talked about in like, God, I'm trying to think. Oh, it's something I've talked about the auteur for sure, which is just like, there's a certain amount of just all this information is going to fly at your face and you're just forced to keep up with it because the story is going to leave you behind if you don't. If you sit there and go, wait a minute, what's up with all these guys? Like the story's already gone. Like you don't have time to just like question the world really. And I think that that's really a skill of pacing, which is one of my favorite things about comics. But
just in general, like there's so much about the setting and the story that we don't know at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, like, are we going to get answers about these things, or kind of are they just the way they are? Like,
yeah.
You get the impression from the flashbacks, like when her father's taking her off for adventures, like these aren't things that other people are necessarily aware of. Like
Right.
they go to the moon, they're the only people on the moon.
Right.
Nobody else is doing that.
Right.
And I wonder if the world has always been this fantastic, or if things have changed over time. If it's one of those things where it's like it's a superhero setting, or
Right.
your equivalent, where all these fantastic things happen, and they literally did change the world. Like somebody opened up a portal to another dimension where there's animal people, and then animal people emigrated to Earth, and now
Right.
there's animal people everywhere.
Top 10 reminds me of this a lot because it's got like the multidimensional gateway and just like all this stuff is just kind of accepted in the big city of Top 10. I can't remember. I think it's just called The City.
I don't know. It's
I
been
don't
so
remember.
long since I
I
read
know.
Top 10.
Yeah. And so, I've always been a fan of comics like this. And my question, I guess, in response to your question is like, is it relevant? Is it relevant that the way the universe is the way that it is? Like, is that necessarily relevant to the story that we're being told here?
Well, I think it's relevant insofar as we also don't know a whole lot about the Kristopher family.
Right. But I think that's going to be the story, right? The
Right.
revelations about the family.
But like there some aspect of them wear red robes and have some sort of giant cathedral full of like Cthulhu monsters that open gateways to other realities or some crazy ass thing.
Right.
And I think as we find out more about the family, we're going to find out more about the universe.
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling that they are in some way responsible for the way that things are,
That's interesting.
or in some way connected to that. And I think that the revelations about one are going to lead to revelations about the other. And I'm super interested in both of those things.
Yeah.
Because reading this month to month, there's so much that you forget just in the course of the month where
Absolutely.
I open the book up and I'm like, what was going on again? Who is this person?
Right.
Like, what's the deal with this? Like, I had completely forgotten when I read issue 3 the first time that the robot dude with the mustache was the same guy who had tried to kidnap her back in issue 1 because it
Right.
had been like 3 months.
Right.
And rereading it now, like, stuff was just so much clearer for me as I was going through it. Like, all the different connections between things and the way that the story was progressing and how the flashbacks meshed with what's going on at the moment.
I liked reading it in the trade, I think, considerably more than I did.
Yeah, it's much, much stronger work reading it all at once.
To be fair, though, I think I feel that way about most comics.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where comics are going now too, is sort of writing for the trade.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we've talked
more
about
so
that.
more so than
so
issues.
many times. Yeah.
Although there are those few comics where the having time to breathe really does affect the way that you perceive the story and can improve it. But I think it is generally the case, you're right, that things are getting more interconnected and make more sense when taken as an entire piece.
Yeah.
See Lost.
I mean, Saga,
or so much of current TV. where it's
Saga-
just like you want to binge on it.
yeah. I mean, I think stuff like Saga, like, although it does read fantastically week to week, are invincible. Like, I feel like it's more enjoyable just to sit down and read, like, a good chunk of it. And that may be personal preference, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I found that things were clearer.
I think you'll see that. I mean, I think what's happening in comics is TV, at least American television, is much more closer to this revolution too. But this is something that happened in novels a long time ago, right? Where we've kind of seen this kind of strange cycle where serialization was very common, and then encapsulated novels became the norm, and now you've got kind of the Wild West where there are those who write the single novel. There are those who clearly are writing for the series. So there are some who write for the series who give no care or concern for whether or not the individual books make sense. And then there are those who write for the series where each individual thing is meant to relatively stand on its own. Mm-hmm. And then you have the rare person who decides to really play with serialization back in an old-timey sense. So like I think like Robert Kirkman's a good example of someone who seems to be very hard, at least in Invincible, trying to still, for the most part, shoot for a lot of his individual comics, relatively self-encapsulating, but then they clearly feed together into one big arc.
I would say some more than others.
Well, right, and I think he plays with it back and forth based on his, I mean, he's in control, so he can kind of speed up or slow down as he wants to. And I've seen that in the big two also. I mean, there are certainly some stories or some issues that are being released that feel like much more episodic. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's kind of like this playground mentality, I think, right now in comics where people are feeling free to do a lot of different things in that way.
It's really interesting to see the difference between two series that I'm following right now, one of which is the whole Avengers thing that's brewing in Marvel with Hickman, who is very, very much about the whole, you need to take the whole story as one piece. Like an individual issue isn't going to tell you that much. And Grant Morrison's The Multiversity, which is coming out right now, where every single issue is a completely different story with a completely different set of characters that is whole in and of itself, and yet there are like thematic links between them that are slowly building a story together. Yeah. And they're kind of on very opposite ends of the serialization versus episodic spectrum, I guess. But it is really interesting how much difference and experimentation there is right now in terms of form and format and people doing different things.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we are open to so many new formats now with the, web comics versus digital comics versus trades versus digital trades versus,
Well, not to mention the diversity in art styles. I mean, Shudder itself has a very dramatic style to it that's not like a lot of other things.
Yeah, I mean, it's what initially drew me to the book. I think was that the art style was. I mean, I read every new #1 when I'm doing Top of the Stack, so like I can't really say that because it's just like, oh, it's a new #1. It just got added to the pile, sure. But I think I would have noticed it because of the art, regardless. And I mean, I'm the kind of person who, when I see art like that is nothing like anything I've ever seen before, like I'm immediately drawn to the book. I gravitate towards it very heavily, and I like a wide range of art. So I think that this book succeeds on that level because it is unlike a lot of other things, but it is also very successful comic book art because the pacing is very good and the panel layouts are very strong and the way that things are framed are very well thought out. And
it's easy to read.
Oh, yeah. It's...
colors are pretty intense, too.
Yeah.
I love the coloring on this book.
Yeah. I don't really know that I have anything really to complain about this series except that, like, it's not, I want more. Like, it's like, my only complaint is that, like, it is ongoing now and it was not completed where I can just sit down and read the whole thing.
Does the guy, sorry, I'm jumping, the mustached robot dude.
Yes.
What's name? Do we have a name?
You're asking the wrong person.
Do you remember, Toby? I don't remember off the top of my head, but let me flip to it real quick.
So while Tobias looking at that, I'll say that so you guys brought up some really interesting comic examples of the surreal. Mm-hmm. But the thing that really grabbed me about this is as a kind of a, I think different styles of literature or writing try to encapsulate different concern for whether or not things are accounted for or not.
His name is Harold.
I'd have to go look something up. But so the visual design of Harold is like TikTok from The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
And then the tiger people are reminiscent of another story that I'm sure I've got a copy of a book somewhere with childhood illustrations in it. So the big thing that this series brought to mind for me was Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm curious about was that there's such a heavy emphasis about the exploration aspect of it, but that the main character was a storyteller. that I'm wondering if one of the twists or the curves that might be dropped is whether or not that this is about story infiltrating the world in a certain sense. Because there are characters that have visual design that
Well, the Richard Scarry people that are
Yeah.
at the beginning of, I don't remember what issue that is, 4, 3?
I think it's 4.
Yeah. Where it's the guy driving the little apple or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, like
Well,
that is...
even Shaw looks like
Yeah.
the lion in the Richard Scarry books.
Right.
Like, you know.
Yeah, so I feel like that's going to be there's some aspect of that hasn't been fully...
Just this may be me entirely just bouncing around my brain, but Shah sounds like Shah, which means king, like Shere
Shere
Khan
Khan.
Right.
means king.
Right. Yeah, so that's kind of one of the things that I was just like, and I read this way too fast. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to start it until yesterday, and so by the time I was done, I was just like, there's something happening visually here that I think is imparting a lot of value into the story that I...
There's definitely
Yeah.
a lot happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this is it's a very dense story.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like it on the surface until you start really digging down into it and thinking about the things that are going on and following the trails.
And this is something that I love about comic books, and specifically there are certain kinds of comic books that you benefit from reading more than once, and you can enjoy reading more than once. And I think this is going to be one of those, because this is the second time I've read this stuff, and I noticed a ton more stuff than I did the first time. And like Toby said, like, it's much more clear reading it back to back than it is reading it month to month. And I think the next time I'm able to approach this series and like sit down and read it when there is more of it, like I'll glean even more information from it and notice more little things. And I think that's great. I think like rereadability is very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of speaks to ultimately the maturity of the art, right? I mean, there are great novels that you go back and you read multiple times because you get all these things. Exactly. You know, there are films that you go back and you watch multiple times because, you know, and
Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park. And then I think that's the thing is that, you know, you've got, and I think that's what the thing that frustrates me in the broader dialogue of comics, at least it did a lot more so a decade ago. I think it's a lot better now, which was that, you know, the blatant assumption that either every superhero book is just wham bam and you're done. You ate your popcorn and you got your visual, but also that comic books are only those things. That's the only thing comics are capable of. And it's like, well, no, there's a very strong indie comics tradition in the United States, especially, but also in France and other places. And that's what everybody was trying to point out, was that there are things that you can do in this medium. But I think a lot of that stuff, you know, has paved the way for things like this. Like, I can't think of a book like this 10 years ago.
No.
I mean, quite frankly, the biggest one that probably jumps to my mind is Fables. Just from the visual representation of all of these characters in a city together.
Right.
And clearly not the same kind of story, but yeah. But even that style is not nearly as wildly energetic and diverse as this. I mean, this is just kind of something on its own.
I think the art in this too is more advanced simply because technology has advanced more too than 10 years ago when Fable was coming out.
One thing I really appreciate about this book is how it introduces characters and concepts. And I had read it, like, going into the rereadability thing. I read it and I was like kind of talking to my mom and I was kind of watching TV. So I like was like doing a lot of things, and I got what happened in the first issue, but I didn't take any notes. I didn't actually pay any attention to anything. So I read it a second time and I felt like I got a lot of information, and a lot of that was in how characters were introduced. Like the main character, when you see her, you think, oh, you know, she's like a 27-something-year-old and like she's bumbling around trying to figure out what she's doing for her life, because that's the typical 20-something-year-old narrative.
Yeah.
And then you find out, no, she's already done everything.
Yeah.
Like now she's just trying to live the quiet life at 27, and that's awesome. And like the concept of going to the moon, where she's like, Dad, this is boring. Like she's on the moon and she's just like, this is boring.
That hit a chord so close to home for me too, because my parents are like and were like phenomenal vacationers. Like that's what they do, and they love to road trip. And so I grew up road tripping all the time, and I just remember like hundreds of trips that essentially mirrored that exact thing where it's like, we're at Devil's Tower, and I'm like, can we go home now? Like, I just want to play video games. And like, we're at some cool place, and I'm reading a book in the backseat of a car because like couldn't give two shits about what's going on outside of like fiction and the escapism in that reality. So I don't know, that mirrored so closely like my own childhood where it's like, look, there's Mount Rushmore over there, and I'm like, I want to go. I want to leave. I'm very bored.
I definitely agree with the idea that there's a lot of really interesting character stuff. I really like the character of Elaine and the way that she was introduced and the way that she developed, and I hope that she comes back in future issues.
Me too.
I hate for her to be a throwaway character that you don't really get anything else with.
I would be surprised if that happened.
Yeah, because, of course, she appears to be a little boy when she's introduced in flashbacks.
Right.
And so a part of me went like, okay, this is a fantastic reality. Like, how much has she actually physically changed over the years? And how and why did that happen?
Right.
I was also really interested by the little brother.
Right.
Both because he's the spitting image of his father.
Yeah.
And he introduces himself as Kate Kristopher, small pause, Jr.
Yeah.
And there's a part of my brain that's going, is he being 100% upfront with
like
who he is?
Is he actually just her father as a child?
Or is he like a clone of her
Right.
father?
Yeah.
Like, what actually happened to her dad after that day that we saw?
Right.
Where did the kid come from? And what has he been actually up to? Because we know that he was raised in Brazil, apparently, or Argentina. And he knows how to shoot a shotgun.
Right.
And we don't know anything else about his, like, where he comes from or what he knows.
Yeah.
And there's so much about that character to be developed. And the fact that we've seen one of Kate's other siblings, who's apparently an awful, awful, awful bitch.
Well,
but we don't know what her other siblings are like or how many of them there are.
I get the feeling they're all going to be less than phenomenal people.
Presumably.
And I love that idea, like these are all like the kind of like the wicked stepsisters, but like
But it's really interesting to me the degree to which this is a character-based story.
Oh yeah,
for such a fantastical universe,
and that's something
where they're like running around and fighting dragons and shit.
Yeah, and that's something that we said so many times on Top of the Stack was like, I can't believe that this book can balance the surrealism with such a deep character story because we've read so many books that can't do either. Like we've read it's like, oh, this is such a fantastic surreal book, but. Like it's not actually that surreal, and it has to constantly remind you, like, ooh, look how weird this is, and you're like, yeah, it's not that weird, buddy. Like, we're just, we've seen it before, and
I've played Earthward and Jim.
Yeah, and there's books where they try to be these deep, intense character stories, and they don't pull off nearly the level of character development that this book can pull off, and it's the balance and pacing in this book is really, I think, something to be marveled at because it's so rare.
Yeah, and I think it's a good example of how to do things quickly.
Yeah.
Like, for example, early on you see a flashback to Kate and her father, and they're running down a hallway, and her father's like, fire a gun with two hands, sweetie.
Yeah.
And then later you see the general, and it's flashback to her and Kate's father.
Right.
Like, the exact same blocking.
Yeah.
The same, like, thing is happening, and he's shooting. And you just get that moment of connection.
Right.
And you get so much out of those two panels.
Yeah.
With no other words spared, no attention. Like, this is just a thing that happens.
Yeah.
And you immediately pick up on it, and you glean so much information, both about Kate's childhood and about who her father is.
Yeah, it's something they talk about in, like, filmmaking a lot. It's just like, especially when movies used to be a lot shorter than they are now. When you have, like, Transformers 4 is 4.5 hours long or whatever bullshit, like, you don't really have to use these techniques. But the economy of your shots, like, getting the most possible information you can into your shots so that you're not wasting film. Like, you're literally not wasting a resource, which is film is expensive to shoot, edit, and like process. And so you have this like economy of shots, economy of script, economy of dialogue that were very important to filmmaking for a long time. And in a lot of ways, they still are. There still are some phenomenal movies that do this kind of stuff, but there are also a lot of movies that kind of just like, because there's no limit on film and audiences will sit through a 4-hour movie sometimes, you can just continuously like put stuff in front of them. And I think that this book, comic books specifically, with the 22-page format, like that kind of economy of panel usage, economy of dialogue, are so important to comic books to get like densely pack a 22-page issue. I think that that's important because you have the opposite where it's like splash page, splash page, splash page. The book's over in 4 minutes. And this book is dense.
Yeah,
but
and
it
I
reads
think it's
quick.
a resource that not every artist uses to its best effect.
Oh, definitely.
When you can convey so much information just from the way that you frame a panel.
Absolutely.
Or like the shape of a shadow on a backdrop. Like, it can tell you so much. In like opera and in movies and TVs, you have like leitmotifs, particular musical refrains that harken back to a certain thing. I've been watching The Legend of Korra because the series just ended. But at the end of last season, you have a character who is the granddaughter of a character from The Last Airbender, the previous series. And at one point she does something and they play the original character's theme that it would play in his dramatic moments.
Right.
And it created this moment of connection between the two of them where she is acting like her grandfather.
Right.
And you're supposed to draw that connection between them.
Yeah.
And you can't do that in a comic. Like, there's no audio, so there's no music. But you can still create those kind of refrains, those callbacks that call out certain emotions or connect certain ideas. And I think too often in, we were talking about AAA video games and AAA comic books and Big Two, like, people don't necessarily expend that much effort in doing things in the absolute most economic way.
Yeah, and well, I mean, I hate to cut you off, Brant, but I think that sometimes, and this is maybe a large argument for a different day, but I think sometimes that's the benefit of creator-owned comics, because Marvel and DC are largely for hire, and you get paid for what you create, and you do want to create the best thing you can possibly create because you're getting paid for it, and you want to create good things so that people will come back and continue to hire you, and your fans will continue to grow, and what yada
and you
yada
can ask
whatnot.
for more money.
Exactly, but there is a difference between a pay for hire gig and your life's work. Like, those are two very different things, and the expenditure I think that you are willing to put into something that is a labor of love and your absolute like make it or break it. Like, if I don't get these ideas out perfectly, like, this idea will kind of fall by the wayside because no one else is going to do this because this is my only shot at this one idea. Like, it's not like he can do a retake on Shudder. They have to get it right the first time. And I think that that's true of stuff like, I mean, there are some authors that continue to write the same story over and over with different characters, but I think for a large part, like, that's what Watchmen was kind of like as well, where it was such this labor of love and this labor of like intensity because he knew that no one would give him this kind of shot again.
And that book is absolutely full of those kinds of visual references that you have
absolutely.
to really be paying attention to in order to catch.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of when you said that. But anyway, Brant, you were gonna.
But Watchmen was work for hire.
It was work for hire, but it was like he knew no one was ever going to give him that shot again. So it was kind of like this like labor of like intense like this. And the other thing is, it was labor. It was work for hire, but it was in a time when there was really only work for hire.
Maybe. See, my whole thing is that first, minimalism.
Yes.
Minimalist preference thing. I think that you are right to say that generally that doesn't happen in the big two. I think one of the biggest things that Marvel's doing, and DC, it's like DC's like kind of having a seizure, and sometimes it seems like it's coming out of its weird coma thing that it's.
From what I understand, they have a new line editor on the Bat titles who's trying to inject that kind of thing.
Well, and I think in general they're going through the fits and starts that took them where they are, and now they're trying to figure out where they're going to go. But my point is that like the Hawkeye series, like that's a minimalist series. Like they use a very simple style to convey quite a bit. The team that works on that uses a lot of techniques that are in that vein to do some of the things that we're talking about, like Phil Noto's work on Black Widow, like very clean lines, very like what I'm trying to get at is that I think to a certain extent there's a greater diversity of attempts to use the broad capabilities of the art in mainstream comics as a byproduct of both the people within and without. And I'm going to use that point to leverage into the thing that says, I think you're right that there can be a difference between something that you're passionate about and something that you just do because you need to get paid. But I don't want to discount the fact that, like, it may very well be, and it seems to be the case at this point, that Dan Slott's lot in life is to be one of the greatest writers of Spider-Man ever to live.
Yeah.
And, I mean, his run is, at this point, how long has he been writing?
Since
10 years at least.
Brand New Day.
Yeah. And so how many other writers have been on Spider-Man that long?
Only Bendis.
Goodness knows, yeah.
Yeah, Bendis on Ultimate.
Yeah.
And then not even Lee was on it for that long, was he?
No. Bendis shattered that record a long time ago.
So I mean, and I mean
issues, I think so.
And the thing about it is that in a certain sense, Slott does have the advantage of being able to sometimes redo the things that he didn't do right the first time, because of that nature of that environment. So it's like I get real, and this is just a personal thing I recognize, I get real squirrely sometimes when there's an attempt to leverage something as independent as therefore better than something that is not.
Well,
that's not the argument that I'm trying to make. I mean, the number one person for that, in my mind, is Don Rosa, who has basically taken over the Donald Duckburg universe and made it like his thing. Like, he has done so much to expand and solidify what that universe is, that it is as much his as Carl Barks or Walt Disney or anybody else who worked on that universe. Mm-hmm. And just because he doesn't own those characters, he didn't invent them, doesn't diminish in any way his contribution or the level of his artistry. The only point that I was making is that when people are, working on their own projects for, on an artistic level, they're perhaps going to do things in a different way versus like, I need to get this issue of Spider-Man out because it's due. Like, I got to get it done because I got 3 other comic books that I got to draw. And
also, like, who knows how long they did layouts for Shudder? Like, how many times did they redo it and like go back and be like, no, it's not ready. Like, we're not ready to launch this book yet. Like, go back to the drawing board. Right. But like, in between issue, 4 whatever and, the next issue of Spider-Man, it's like, you only have 30 days. So regardless of how far ahead you get in the plotting and planning, at some point you're just going to run out of time and be like, there is a wall, there is a deadline at which like we can no longer put off and perfect this anymore. And there is a great saying among artists, but essentially it's like art is never done. You just have hit your deadline. Like, you're never done working on. You would go back and perfect it forever.
And there's certainly some who certainly are a diversity of artists who can work better under different forms of pressure and sometimes insert themselves in those things specifically to get work from them. I'm actually in this vein. Like, if there aren't things bearing down on me, I tend to always have a good reason not to do what I need to do.
Same. But I guess in my mind, it's a difference in ideology between those books where it's like the artist needs to catch up, so we're going to take 3 months off, versus the artist needs to catch up, so we're going to have a fill-in artist for 2 months.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that one is better or worse. They're different ideologies.
Well, I think that's what fascinates me so much about some of the stuff that we're seeing out of all of these shared universes, not just Marvel and DC, but Valiant has been doing some of this stuff, and IDW, and where it's kind of a weird hybrid between that, where it's like they seem to do everything in their power to not create an unsustainable delay, or they will flex their schedule in such a way, but they'll keep teams matched up Whereas it, for Wolverine and the X-Men episode, issue number 54, well, we're just going to have to shove somebody else in there. And so it's interesting to see that those machinations happen in the industry on a lot of different levels. Where I think, because I think I've made that comment before, where there's certain stories where I'm just like, it's the things together that make the big difference for me. And I wouldn't appreciate it or care if it was one or the other of those components got mixed, not just two, but often multiple, if there's colorists and inkers and stuff.
Right.
And it's interesting, too, the way that you can see a company like Marvel grooming certain writers or certain artists, where it's like, okay, Jake Wyatt, for example, was the fill-in artist on Ms. Marvel when we were talking about that a couple of weeks ago. And then he just did an issue of Edge of Spider-Verse. Mm-hmm. And it's like obvious that Marvel is giving him work, kind of like, fill in here, do this random issue. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see him as the main penciler, inker, whatever, on an actual series like that's his in the future, because it's obvious that Marvel likes his work and they're kind of bringing him up.
Yeah, and also as the world becomes more accustomed to trade waiting or like reading things in their completion, or like, there are very few people that go to the comic book store week to week, as opposed to the number of people that read series once they're finished or once they've come out or after.
I pretty much have given up entirely picking up my file
on
any kind of consistent basis.
And that's the thing. That's like kind of the consensus I've found amongst my friends who are, comic book fans for a long time, is it's like, it's just not convenient to read single issues. They're just kind of a drag. But when you go back and read something in trade, it's so jarring to get those fill-in issues as opposed to reading it week to week. It's month to month, it's less jarring. But reading it in the trade, you also don't notice delays. Like, I can go pick up, trade 3 of Saga and not know that they took a 6-month break between trade 2 and trade 3 because the team is the same. And so time isn't this, there's no concept of that time, right?
It's like you could read volume 1 of Four Eyes and never know that they were... Oh, wait.
It's also something that you're seeing more in anime.
Yeah.
When you watch it as it's coming out, there will be certain scenes where the frame rate just drops. Or it's like a pan across a still image. Or the art just gets really crappy for some reason. And then when you actually go back and buy the DVD, all that stuff has been fixed.
Yeah.
Because they're just getting it out as quickly as they can on
the
budget they have.
When you buy a video game.
And then
you get a 40 gigabyte patch.
Yeah, oh my
right.
God.
But
Fuck off.
I could totally imagine it being a thing at some point where, a comic comes out and it's like, okay, this is the art that we have and it's kind of rough and there's not a whole lot of detail. And then when the trade comes out, like, we're going to remaster it, we're going to do the colors better.
We've seen some of that with black and white books that are later recolored, like they come out as black and white because they're web comics or they're weekly comics or whatever, and then they didn't have time or money.
I think you're right with webcomics in particular. It's a very common thing.
And then later they get colored.
Or add in extra pages.
Another example of this would be Jeff Jock's webcomic. When he took it to an actual trade format. Questionable content, that's what it's called. Yeah. He actually redrew all the scenes for the trade so that his art style would be the same as it is on the current webcomic as opposed to the very
simple, I guess. Like it was like less refined, rougher, his early stuff. But
much more stick figure-y.
Yeah, and DC does edits between single issues and the trades, but they do it to make the universe more clear and easy to understand by removing references to things that aren't actually in continuity or add stuff that,
like Robin versus Red Robin.
Or Teen Titans versus never having had a Teen Titans before.
What also interests me about that from just kind of a logistics point of view is like the 2 issues in Ms. Marvel where the art changes that we were just discussing. Using those, I wonder if that was a coordinated technique. It's like, we're going to have this slightly different story, change in tone. She's going to meet Wolverine. She's going to do this thing.
Oh, yeah.
Let's bring in another artist. That will give our other artists time to catch up, especially if they can plot a little bit in advance. Because I think a lot about Queen and Country, where clearly, at first it may have been to a certain extent who he could afford to work with, but I've always gotten the impression that Greg Rucka picked who he wanted to work with for each.
Yeah,
Well,
I've gotten that impression as well.
And so I think to a certain extent, like you still like the difference between like random fill-in issue versus concerted choice to pick a different artist who might either
Right.
fit a shift in tone or a shift in style that a
Yeah.
writer like can, writing to a different artist.
I mean,
basically.
imagine like you have these Captain Marvel stories, and then eventually like, oh well, Captain Marvel's going to be cosmic now. Like, well, let's shift artists to show like how different the setting is. Like
Right.
that kind of stuff, I think is intelligent. I think it's smart, and I think that companies are kind of hipping to like what makes an appropriate time to add a fill-in artist and what doesn't. Because in the past we would see stuff like Infinite Crisis, for example, or was it Crisis on Infinite Earths? Yeah, I think it's Crisis on Infinite Earths, where the last 2 issues are drawn by a different artist.
You mean the Infinity Gauntlet?
I do mean Infinity Gauntlet. Thank you.
Yeah, where Ron Lim comes in.
Yes, thank you. That is exactly what I meant. Yeah, Infinity Gauntlet, where it's like, when I read that now, 20 years removed, like, it's weird that the last 2 issues are different.
Well, because
But
it's
at
all
the-
one continual story and it's just suddenly different.
There's no reason to switch artists there. Like, that is not a tonal shift. That is not a shift in, like a new story, or, it's just they had to get the book out because that's how comics worked.
And I'm sure I have plenty of other reasons to be frustrated by Grant Morrison, but something that did not help my opinion of him was that one of my first big pieces of exposure to him was All New X-Men.
Oh, yeah.
During the whole Zorn, Cassandra Nova, all that stuff. And in the middle of that run are some horrific filler issues.
Yeah, they're...
Who by a couple of artists whose name I never remember, but it's like good on them for managing to get shoehorned in for that stuff, because they managed to make at least a minor career out of getting some stuff done. But I remember at the time, I'm just like, they had picked some specific artists, things had a certain style. I mean, I think Frank Quietly was doing it for a while, and then all of a sudden it was like this really bad, sketchy, rough, like, I mean, Wolverine, like, I complain about Frank Quietly's aren't making people look doughy, but like, I remember there's this one scene when this villain artist during All the New X-Men, and it looks like basically Wolverine's face has been smashed flat by an iron, and like his hair is like growing out of every pore in his skin, and it's like all really rough and bad. And I'm just like, what the hell is going on in the middle of this story? And I'm like, and of course I took that innate dislike for Grant Morrison and said, fuck you, Grant Morrison, even though it had nothing to do with
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, that
Yeah.
that kind of thing goes way back. I remember rereading old issues of Warlock and the Infinity Watch this past year. And there's a story going on with a particular artist, and then there's 1 month with a story that's connected in no way to what was going on, and the artist is just so excruciatingly bad. Like, no character is ever on model throughout the entire book. It just looks grotesquely misshapen from start to finish, and then that issue is over, and it goes back to the story and artist that was on it before, as if nothing had happened and no time had passed. And it stands out in my mind as one of the worst comics I've ever written or I've ever read, purely from a production value perspective. And it's like, just take a month off.
Well,
it's okay. Like, you don't need this random filler issue that I'm going to hate you for having wasted my money on.
Well, and I think that a lot of that is editorial pressure, because we saw that with the Jason Aaron Thor series, that we all really, really were into Godslayer Godbomb, and then here comes the movie Thor 2, and there's suddenly 5 issues about Malekith that have nothing to do with anything else that's happened in the series. Once those 5 issues are over, that next issue came out, and it was essentially like, just forget about those 5 issues. This is what happened directly after issue 12. And it was so bizarre to read that as single issues, because they just felt completely unnecessary. And so...
Yeah, and it wasn't even a bad story.
No, it just
just didn't fit in
right
with what else was going on.
That should have been a miniseries.
right.
That should have been a totally
But they
different...
didn't want to do it that way, because
Right.
then nobody would have bought it.
And so I think that the editorial pressure and just, blatant greed in a lot of... they are running a business. Like
Well, and I wonder if some of that stuff's like still hold over from things like subscription model.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, well, somebody paid for a book every month. Somebody's getting it in a comic shop every month, so we'll just fold it into this. And I think they probably justify it to themselves as being like, so we're not putting an extra comic on the market to confuse people and make it seem like we're trying to do all this stuff, right? We're just doing everybody a favor. But it does make me be like, well, fine, I'll just wait for the trade so that I can read Godslayer, Godbomb, and not
Right.
worry about 5 issues of the
Yeah.
Malekith story, because I don't care about
Yeah,
that
and I
else.
think that is I mean, we're so far off topic at this point, but I'll continue to drive us even further off topic with, I think that the comic books industry, the reason that reading trades and the reading things like after the fact is so, approachable and so much better in a lot of ways is just because like comic books coming out weekly is confusing because you don't know if you're going to get a fill-in artist or a fill-in issue or whatnot. You don't know if you should skip that story or read that story. And I think that in a lot of ways, the comic book industry is doing itself a disservice by adding, like Brant's saying, like adding more books to the market and making things confusing. People really think that, when like a miniseries comes out, they're like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you added another weekly book." But like, if that miniseries gets collected into a trade and is actually phenomenal, like people will go buy it,
Right.
and they don't care that it was a miniseries. Like, does it really matter that it was numbers like 1 through 3 of Wolverine meets Juggernaut? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, if it's a good trade, then people will read it.
This is why the speculator market needs to just get the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah,
because, I mean, at the end of the day, the thing that makes this whole really frustrating is that any one of us could walk in. Like, most of these miniseries, are what, between 3 and 7 issues? If it was bound in a collection, I could go into the store, I could pick it up, I could flip through and be like, yes, this looks awesome, I will buy it. Or no, I will not. I think about the production costs of just having to print it on paper for 7 months in a row or 3 months or 5 months in a row. Mm-hmm. It's like, God, this is a waste of everyone's money and time. It's a waste of their money and time. It's a waste of my money and time. Like, I like that Amazing Spider-Man is still on the newsstands. I like that it's continuous. I think that it's like Dallas, right? There will always be an Amazing Spider-Man episode on, no matter what, where I go, no matter where I am.
Well, Dallas got canceled for a long time, but like General Hospital.
There you go. Yeah, sure. Simpsons,
a soap opera,
or The Simpsons, if we're gonna go there. It's so syndicated now. It's like a Ouroboros. It eats its own tail. It is persistent and omnipotent. I can say it however the hell I want.
You can.
I've heard it that way.
You're welcome to be as wrong as you like.
I'm not Joe. I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole with you.
How do you say it?
Ouroboros.
Okay. Yeah, it's Ouroboros.
Anyway.
No, it's definitely Ouroboros.
I am not Joe. I'm not going there. Anyway, all I'm trying to say is that it seems to me that the industry could stand to embrace that a little bit more. But I think the big turnoff for that is look at what's happening with Star Wars #1.
We can't convince you to buy the single issue and then also buy the variant of the single issue and then again buy
the 50 variants
or the 50 variants and then buy the trade. We don't get all all this crazy money. Because if you think about it, when you're buying Marvel books, like if you're paying $4.99 or $3.99 for a Marvel book for 4 or 5 issues and then also buying the trade, you're paying double.
But how many people are out there actually doing that? And how many of them could be suckered into buying something like a variant trade? First edition print run, hollow foil cover, only 30 of those were ever printed.
Absolutely.
Like, you could transition the market to a better place for everybody and still get all those good people who clearly just need to have their money taken from them for whatever god-awful reason there is.
And this, I think, there is a larger discussion about speculators in the comic book market, too, is like... The reason that it's such a persistent problem, I think, is because the speculators out there buying these books are so uneducated and they're bad at speculating. Like, it's not the good speculators that need to go away. It's bad speculators because they ruin the market because they're like, brand new #1 came out, it's going to be worth money. It's like, that's bad information. Like, someone gave you bad information along the way.
Well, at this point, they're
That's
all Lego
false.
covers, and if I have the complete set of Lego variant covers, they'll be worth nothing someday.
Right. And so you have idiot... speculators purchasing books for more than they're worth. Like, that's something. If there's these guys that went out in the morning on the day of Captain America 25 coming out when Cap dies. Spoilers. And
it's okay, he's not dead anymore.
He's not dead anymore. It doesn't matter. Spoilers, now he's Clint Eastwood or whatever. So they would go out and they would buy like 10 copies of this book, right? And then they put it on eBay and they sold it for like $200 or whatever. That very day, right? Even 2 weeks later, they were only worth like $25. Because we had all heard that there were going to be more printings because that's how fucking paper works. You can just print more of it.
More.
And now they're only worth about $20. So the drop between Like, the amount of time when they were worth a lot of money and the amount of time that they were not worth them, or they were a consistent level finally, was like a week.
Right.
It took a week for that bubble to burst. And what's interesting, though, is that there are number one issues that their bubble has not yet burst on, and that they continue to rise in value. And those books are books like Walking Dead, Invincible, Saga, indie comics, not Marvel and DC.
Things that people didn't know 3 months ahead of time were going to be big.
Right. They didn't have Marvel emailing them going, this is a collector's item.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course not. Because these people were taking a chance and were like, we don't know if this series is going to succeed or not. And so those speculators, if they were purchasing those number ones, or, if they just got lucky, were like, I don't know, this Chew number one seems interesting. Like, I'll pick it up. It's different. Right. And then it just fucking skyrockets because they didn't print enough. They didn't know it was going to be popular. So if you are a speculator out there and you go, I want to make a fuck ton of money buying comics, just buy every indie number one. Just buy every single one and put them in a box for 25 years and maybe you'll get crazy lucky. Who knows? But don't go out and buy every fucking Marvel variant cover and miniseries because the bubble on those bursts so fast.
Yeah, but they don't care because they make their money, right? Like, it's like the people who buy PlayStation 4s and sell them for $1,000.
Right.
Well, eventually another place. I missed getting my issue of Thor #1.
Right.
Well, I'm going to get another one because they reprinted it like 5 times.
Right, and you can always go to Comixology and buy it, and because you're not...
Yeah. I mean, I wanted it in physical print because I wanted to send a signal to Marvel that I'm willing to support these kinds of radical experiments in gender identity. Because
they still... so the thing is also about Comixology is, like, it's not like Marvel isn't tracking those sales.
Of course.
Because if you buy a book on eBay later, if you had decided, well, I'm going to get my physical copy of Thor #1, I don't care. I'm going to go on eBay and I'm going to buy it for $25. Marvel doesn't see that. Because none of that money goes to Marvel.
Right.
They only got one sale out of that book. It doesn't matter. But if you go into Comixology and go, well, fuck physical copy, I'll buy a digital copy. That's how I'll support this, great endeavor. They still see that.
Right.
That's so important. And I think that people forget, like, how much of an impact digital purchases still make. But they have books like Miss Marvel, which is their #1 selling digital book. Because it's popular, and the people that want to read that book may not have access to a comic book store that they
or
can
don't
go
care
to
about a
every
physical
month.
comic.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Because they're not part of that old mode.
Right, exactly. And I don't know, huge departure about the world of comics, but
yeah,
I think that kind of shit's
So
important.
go buy every copy of Shudder that you can.
Well, I mean,
because it's hot shit.
And I agree.
Well, no,
I think
go and buy all the variants of Shudder #1. Don't let them tell you that doesn't exist, because it does.
I think there were a couple, to be honest, because
Really?
Image does variants too. They're like, I mean, they're probably like 1-in-1 variants. Like, they're just like every other cover. That's how some companies do it, but there may have been a couple variants. They do. Image does variants.
Yeah. Some, like, whenever I want a variant, it's like, because I want to put this in a frame because it looks really cool.
Yeah.
Or because it got signed by
You guys
somebody.
have seen Top of the Stack. That's our background.
Yeah.
That's like, those are all my variants and weird covers I found that I like.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I don't mind the fact that variants exist per se. It's just that I feel like it just leads to some weird
Well, I mean, it doesn't hurt me
behavior.
as a person. Like, I can just go and get the regular one, or in my case, I can just go and get the trade, or I can take the trade out of the library.
Yeah.
I think,
But I think it does hurt the industry in terms of supporting things that aren't necessarily popular but pay the bills. Because the variant cover thing is very much a power law distribution. It's that 80-20 thing, or 20-80 thing, that 20% of your customers represent 80% of your income, because those are the fools who are buying all of these variants.
Right.
And so the things that they buy are the things that make money, but it doesn't necessarily represent where most people's interests lie.
right, which is where you get those tensions about expanding your market and then having that weird, especially, and I think Marvel's been having this as a particularly big problem in a sense, because when you've seen the success of, like I was just saying before, like the Black Widow, Hawkeye, those stylistically very different comics have been very popular, or at least critically acclaimed. And then you've got Captain Marvel and Miss Marvel as books that have just kind of exploded in popularity, but they represent a segment of the populace. There may be overlap readers from the old guard, but there's so much new readership in those. And so it's
Right.
like, you got all the people who are like kind of gamer gatey, like, why are I want women in bikinis with, all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, but you may not necessarily have the leverage anymore. And so that tide might shift. And so,
Well,
think
and it's
these-
what I've always said about video games too, is it's like video game producers and creators, they don't care about your feelings. They don't give two shits. So if you think like, I don't want women in video games, like, it doesn't matter, because as soon as they realize that the majority of their money is coming from women in video games, like, you will see a massive title shift in the way the titles are created, because it's like, oh, what we thought we were creating these games for, it turns out is actually not the majority of the population. It's just like a loud portion of the population, and the people who are actually buying our games would prefer if the games were more like this.
Yeah,
and so they'll shift everything over.
I'm interested to see what holiday 2015 or 2016 looks like, because the big study that showed that women are the majority,
53% of
of all
the gaming market
came out this last March. So I think it's like average life cycle of a AAA title is 3 years from development to publish.
Yeah.
And so it's like, all right, let's see if that hit the industry, because we'll be able to tell around the holidays 2016 or so.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, there's a huge portion of the industry that wants to simply ignore that survey and pretend that it's not real. So I think that there will always kind of be this core of boys club gaming stuff that comes out during the holiday. And it'll be interesting, I think, to see how they advertise those games, because I don't think they'll change the way they advertise games like Call of Duty or Halo, or these first-person shooters that are predominantly like directly targeted at this boys' club of gaming. Sure. Even though they know that they have female gamers playing them, it's like, well, we already have their money because they're interested in this game. I think it'll be interesting to see how they market games that they're not sure about who they're making the games for.
Yeah. Well, I think you'll see what'll happen. What I predict is that you'll see those bigger companies like EA will diversify. Right, like they try. I don't know. Like even like Mirror's Edge, right, which was kind of like, as soon as it came out, and they were like, "This is crap." Even now, they're like, "I think we're gonna make Mirror's Edge too," because randomly that game has like crazy cult following.
Right.
Like BioWare, like making overtly homosexual opportunities in Dragon Age Inquisition, like. That's an EA product at this point.
Right.
Like, so I think that you will see that they will find other ways to represent it. And of course, from my perspective, if you are a white hetero cis, I love titties and ass type guy,
keep going.
The biggest thing that would be to your advantage would be to see a continued diversification in your platform, because at that point you're no longer the majority, and then no one will give a shit if you want to watch your bikini based.
That's the argument. About,
some people will care,
but that's the argument about Japanese animation. Like, people are like, is it weird that there's like this really like reclusive part of Japanese animation that is like very overtly, sexist and just kind of horrible and pornographic, is like, but the thing is, like, no one really cares because there's so many people reading manga and watching anime that it's like, we all know that they're perverts. Like, hentai directly translates into pervert. Like, that's what that means. Like, it's like, that's great. That's over there for the perverts. And then they get that. And then everyone's like happy with that, because it doesn't like invade the majority culture. Right? And I think that's kind of what you're saying about video games and
I think
comic books to a large extent.
We are off on a terrible, terrible tangent. But,
let's do it.
To the extent that video games are becoming more mainstream, I think you're going to see something very similar to movies, where you've got your Fast and the Furious 7 coming out, or your latest Bruce Willis action movie or whatever. But then those same companies that are making those movies, your Sonys and your Paramounts and your Amblin Entertainment or whatever, like, they're also making romantic comedies and whatever, like other different kinds of movies. Like, there are those things that appeal to those people specifically, and then there are other things that appeal to different people, and both of those can coexist in the same universe.
Because it's interesting now that we have major companies like EA and stuff, like the AAA titles, like, it tends to be kind of a sameness across the board and all of the variety comes from indie games. And some of those games have such great ideas, but they are not funded by those major companies.
There are
and I think
a lot
that
of,
they are going to be in
there's
the future.
a lot of strong similarities between video games and comic books right now.
Yeah.
Just both in the way that their markets have traditionally been and the way that they are diversifying and evolving.
Yeah, I have a hard time separating the conversations between like, oh, the future of video games and also the future of comic books, because I think that they are so inextricably linked.
I don't think you need to. I mean, I think quite frankly, it's about the future of media.
I
Because
agree.
as much as we might want to say that, like, hey, look at Sony, it's diversified. It's like, well, they don't make as many romantic comedies as they used to, and like Thomas Jane is out there talking a lot about how, like, you no longer have the $25 million action movie. It's always like, you know, except for very rare ones now with like Sylvester Stallone and the Expendables franchise and stuff, because there's this belief that it's like if it doesn't reach the broadest possible demographic, it won't succeed. But the reality is that the media market is showing us that highly specialized, narrow focused opportunities do exist, and you can crowdsource a Veronica Mars sequel,
Right.
if your methods of distribution and soliciting interest aren't 3 guys in a boardroom who are like,
Right.
I think this is an awesome idea. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why you don't need to worry about extricating it, because all those conversations overlap.
Right.
So I'm going to make a power play. I'm going to try and drag us back into the comics conversation.
Do it.
No.
Cade, you've been pretty quiet. What do you think about Shudder?
Actually, this time I was trying not to be quiet when we were actually talking about the book.
Yeah, I know you kind of have a sore throat.
Yeah, no, I tried to put in what I thought of it while people were saying it.
Well, do you have anything that you want to add, I guess?
Not really. I really liked this book. Surprise. I thought that
aghast.
I thought that it was very well done, and I was surprised on the production value of it. Like, it was people I had never heard of before, which, I mean, granted, I do get surprised a lot, but it was not a book that had really appealed to me before. And forcing myself to sit down and read it, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. When is it coming out? And I got really excited right at the beginning when the very first letters page was like, hey guys, in the future, I'm currently writing book number 7, but number 1 is finally out, so here you go. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. They're going to continue it, and like right from the beginning, they know that it's going places. And I got really excited, and I really liked the book. There was one spot that only occurred to me because I was trying to find anything negative I could say about the book. And that was there was a pacing issue at the ends of either 4 or 5, I don't remember which. I felt that they could have took out a couple panels and it would have been just fine. But I mean, if that's my biggest gripe about the book, then it's a phenomenal book.
Yeah. Well,
like, a couple of pretty panels didn't have to be there.
That's kind of the problem I have with this book, and I wanted to talk about it, I guess, because it's kind of a gateway vehicle for me to talk about other stuff, but I'm in the same camp as Cade. It's like, I just don't really know what I didn't like about it.
My biggest complaint is that I have a damnedest time describing what the comic's about to other people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, there's no succinct way of saying, like, oh, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know what their elevator pitch was when they first went to Image.
Well, they don't have to do that, though. Like, that's the beauty of Image, is like,
Right.
you submit a completed project, and they either
Yeah, their elevator
accept it
pitch
or
was,
they don't.
I've got a comic and you charge me how much? And they're like, well, this much. And they're like, okay, great, thanks. Ding!
I mean, that's the beauty of how Image works, is like, when you read their submissions page on their website, it's like, you must have an artist already. You must have concept art. You must have panels drawn. You must have story scripted. They basically are like, you must have a complete comic, or we're not interested. And I love that. I mean, like, it's hard for people to meet artists and stuff, but
Right.
I mean, that's why you have stuff like this in the Mercenary Sea, where they were both so far ahead of the initial issue that came out, is because they like essentially like submitted a large portion of it to Image before approval, before it ever went to press.
Right.
Like that's how they're so far ahead.
I think it's also why I said earlier that this reminded me a lot of Alice in Wonderland, in the sense that it's like not only the visual aspects, but kind of like, at this point you can describe it using itself because it's such a cultural icon. But, you know, can you imagine like, oh, I just read the most fascinating story about a little girl who goes down a rabbit hole and then meets a mocking turtle and a queen who's like insane and plays with flamingos croquet. Like, you know,
There's a walrus.
It's a nonsense story.
Yeah.
Is literally like what the origin of it. Charles Dodgson was on a riverboat with these 3 girls who lived nearby, and they were like, "Tell us a story." And the oldest girl, I think it was the oldest girl, whose name was Alice, said, "Let there be nonsense in it," and he made up this nonsense story, and that's where Alice in Wonderland.
Surrealism, man.
Yeah.
Nonsense. That's the word I'm going to use from now on. It's like, where's the shit with the nonsense? When am I the blue hedgehog that's fast and like runs into robots? Like, when is that? We'll bring the nonsense back.
Oh, that reminds me. We do have listener questions.
We do. I did pull
But-
them up earlier and then I forgot. And started browsing Facebook.
But I want to talk about the comic.
Do it.
Yes, please
Yeah.
do.
So I had my Lisa Frank book. I had like 2 pages worth of notes. Pretty sure I left it at the goth bar. So that's interesting for whoever
this is kind of
found
like a
that.
weird surreal thing in of itself. Your Lisa Frank book and a goth bar.
Yeah. Well,
about the...
I mean, it
The
fits.
coolest part
Like,
about the goth bar is that it's owned by her dentist,
Yeah.
who is a Satanist.
He's not really a Satanist. But he looks like Roger Waters from Pink Floyd, and he has a dentist office that like the hallways are shaped like a maze, and the waiting room, the lobby, there is a picture of a fish pulling a tooth out of a screaming man, and that is the only painting that is up in that room. And that's my dentist.
Well, there you go.
Who also owns the
Welcome.
goth bar where you coincidentally lost your Lisa Frank notebook.
Yeah. So maybe next time I go to the dentist, he'll have it for me. The fingers crossed.
Wow.
Excuse me, Mr. Dentist. I left my Lisa Frank book in your goth bar.
Do
Do you
still have
happen
it?
to have that?
It has a lot of important notes in it. No, so a lot of this is from memory, but I wanted to talk about one of the things I really liked about this book, and I didn't think about it until like after I put the book down and I was like doing like dishes or something, that this book is essentially the consequences of like an Indiana Jones-esque character, right? Like of this, like her father was probably like this like romancer and did like all this crazy shit, and that's probably where her siblings come from.
The James
Who, like-
Bond syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Where like if he's really banging all these ladies in all these different countries, like wouldn't he have a bunch of weird
bunch of
children?
kids, yeah. And like if he's like seducing like a sorceress, yeah, she's gonna have an evil daughter
Yeah.
who throws dragons at her siblings. Like, of course, that's what makes sense. So I'm hoping that that's where the story goes, because that's what I think is going on. But
I didn't pick up on that at all, and I love that.
like,
I love that concept.
yeah, that's the only thing I could think of. Like if he has a whole bunch of kids, like they're probably a whole bunch of different moms.
Well, because we don't ever really meet or
Her-
hear about mom.
Well, you hear about her a little bit, but
Right.
she's always like, we don't talk about her.
Yeah.
So a part of me kind of wants her mom to be like some evil woman that he
Yeah.
seduced, or I don't know.
Maybe he stole her from the mom, like
Yeah.
and that's why she wasn't there when she was growing up.
My
'Cause,
favorite
like,
version of that is Willow. When
yeah,
Man Mardigan shows up and Sorsha goes from being like the evil general to instantly good
yeah,
through the power of Dickon.
yeah. Everybody loves that. Everybody loves that movie. Mostly because of Val Kilmer and Warwick Davis. Mostly Val Kilmer though,
Yeah, mostly.
because he was awesome.
So I'm sorry, Kaylee, continue.
There was something else I wanted to talk about.
Her father doing it with lots of evil ladies.
Her father obviously did it with a bunch of evil ladies. I felt like this book showed allyism really well, where Elaine was, she's trans.
Yeah.
Like, and it's obvious.
Yeah.
And it's not like this big deal. It's not something that's like, oh my God, she's weird. She does this, or she's a trope of what we think trans people are like. She's a very well-developed character who has clearly gone through these struggles of identifying as female, though being born in a male body. And she rocks it. She rocks being herself.
Yeah.
And she has aspects to herself and to her character other than just being like a cardboard cutout of what people think a trans woman would be like. Mm-hmm. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good representation in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's definitely one of the things that I appreciated later having read it. It wasn't what initially drew me to the book like it does to some books, but like, I mean, some books I read specifically because it's like, oh, this book is about, it's good representation and whatnot. But I loved that this was included in this book
mm-hmm.
because it is such a fantasy book and such a surreal book, but to have such grounding in a reality of like, well, this is the thing that could happen to a person, and it's not weird, and it's not treated like it's weird. It's treated with the same gravity that all other situations and all other, kind of personal things are treated in this book. And I thought it was great. When I first read it, I almost didn't notice
mm-hmm.
that was in there. And then I remember talking to Mannix about it, and he was like, "Oh, I almost didn't notice that either." And
I'd completely forgotten until I reread it.
Yeah,
like that Elaine was even a character. I just completely blanked.
Yeah, and I think that it's just such a nice part of this book that,
mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many small details in this book that make it what it is, and I think that that's one of them that makes it really cool. So.
And I think that's something that we're going to see more and more of as time goes on.
I hope so.
And I really appreciate that that's a thing.
Yeah, like representation is massive. I mean, and I think that we are finally starting to really understand how massive it is, and just the fact that that there's fiction out there in the world that is about someone that is like you is huge. I mean, just as a young person, if you feel alone in the world and like no one understands what your struggle is like and nothing, and you turn to fiction and you read about nothing but people that are nothing like you, like that helps solidify that aloneness in the world, I think, and the idea that like you can't succeed. But if you pick up a book one day and you find someone that's like, that person is like me, like there's a superhero out there that's like me, there's a character out there that I can relate to, that's huge for a kid. I think it's so important. I mean, we're
like
seeing
me and Straczynski Spider-Man.
Exactly.
I was
just
actually
like that.
just talking to somebody recently who's been diagnosed with a mental disorder. Mm-hmm. And the thing that he keeps saying is it's so good to have a word to describe the thing that I feel.
Yeah.
Or like the way that this particular thing works in my head that isn't like everybody else. And I know, oh, this is why.
Yeah.
Like this is a real thing. This is not just me alone in my head.
Right.
And like representation, like I think it works along the same way where somebody can look at somebody else and go, that the thing that you are is exactly how I have always felt.
Right.
Inside and never known how to describe or felt like I was weird or
mm-hmm.
gross or just different or, I was a monster of some kind because society tells me that the thing that I feel like I should be is wrong.
Or just that there is no one else that feels the way that you feel about the thing that you are. Like there's no one in the world that has ever felt the way you have. And like
Right.
that is so disheartening because if you were just like, no, people totally feel like that.
Yeah,
That's huge.
One of my favorite examples was a story that was kind of making the rounds on Tumblr of a girl or like a teenage girl who took her like 8-year-old brother or something to see Guardians of the Galaxy. And Rocket is explaining how Drax people are completely literal and they don't understand metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
And he got really excited because he's on the autism scale or spectrum. And he's like, that's like me. I don't understand metaphors. And it was like suddenly not only does he have somebody that he can relate to, and now Drax is his absolute favorite character in anything ever, but she found it easier to relate to him.
Yeah.
Like having this sort of outside representation of like, no, this is a thing. Like that's a thing that happens. It's not so bizarre that nobody could ever comprehend the things that
Right.
you think. Like it's a thing.
Yeah.
Like you're normal.
Yeah. Or I mean like And that's I think that normal is an interesting word because it's like that's something that I think we all realize as growing up is like no one's really like normal. You know, there's
Yeah,
nothing.
but
There is no normative behavior for humans. We all just kind of like grow up and accept that we're part of this culture and whatnot. And I think that they're more important than feeling normal is feeling like you have a place somewhere in the world, or there are people that are like you, or that you can relate to something, or that that you don't feel alone.
Right.
And
And perhaps normal is not quite the right term, but I think that there is a normalizing quality in seeing representation where you don't feel like the outcast.
yeah, and I think it helps you feel like a part of the world for the first time when you're like, there are other people that exist in this world that are similar to me. And like, if that's the first time you've ever seen that, like, I think that that's a huge step for a lot of people.
Agreed.
I think that that's so cool. And I loved it when I read that the first time. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I'm glad that's in here. And so, yeah, it's worth mentioning for sure. I don't know. We should get to the listener questions before this is 5 hours long.
Yes.
So
Completely forgot that we're going to do that.
on our Facebook page, Harley left us some questions. The first one being, what is the anime YouTube show the chart is doing? It does not have a name yet because it has not started, and it will launch at the end of January, so stay tuned. I'm going to be making more announcements about YouTube in January.
It's going to be Animaniacs.
Nope. False. Wrong. I mean, it's as much about manga as it is about anime. It's probably actually more about manga than anything else. But we will be talking about manga creators who have had their stuff made into anime. And so Jasmine and I will be doing a show for YouTube. And the first episode, I really hope I can get done by the end of January. That's what, fingers crossed. That's going to be the timeline on that. So stay tuned. There will be more announcements in January. And the second question is, what are your guys' favorite licensed books? Example would be Sonic the Hedgehog or Predator. Like licensed comics. You want to just go around and lightning round this? Brant?
Toby and I are giving this look like, well, crap, what does that even...
Yeah, I'd have to think about that for a while.
I have mine.
We can come back to it. I mean, like, I know mine as well, just because it was a
Well, why don't you guys say
favorite.
yours, and then
All right,
maybe by
Kaylee,
then I'll have thought
you
of
want
it.
to start?
Mine's Adventure Time.
Yeah.
The Adventure Time comics. I adore them.
It's
They're
like
my favorite.
Yeah, it's a lot like watching the show.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty outstanding. I think I have to go with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, not only because it was like what got me into comics a lot as a kid, but also because IDW's current ongoing TMNT series is phenomenal, and I love it. Although, technically, it's a license of a TV show that was licensed from a comic, so I don't know if I can count that, so...
It's an adaptation of an adaptation. It's like when they put out a comic book of a movie that's based on a comic book.
Yeah, exactly. But I really love Star Wars, and I grew up reading all the Dark Horse Star Wars stuff, so that's in there as well.
Actually, so yeah, that's what I was going to say, is Star Wars Legacy
Yeah,
was really, really good. But I mean, it's original content in their licensed universe, so
right.
hopefully I don't meet the criteria of this particular question.
I think
but-
so. I mean, like, all of the Alien and Predator comics take place in their original content based in the universe.
Actually, interestingly enough, some of those happen in correspondence with novels that were written,
Yeah. What was it?
which is weird.
World at War? Was that the one? The Predator one?
Yeah, that was one of them, and then the other one is what AVP, the first AVP movie, was loosely based on with
Yeah.
Horiko, I think her name, but basically the original AVP novel.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. It's called World at War, I think. The one where they, like, the first time the Predators and aliens ever meet, and there's the woman, is it Machiko, I think,
Yeah,
right? In the
Machiko,
comics.
right.
Yeah, in the book. Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. It might not be
Yeah.
called the World at War, but, like, they refer to it as that
Yeah.
later. Because then they do one called Three Worlds War that's, like, based on that times 3. Because there's 3 wars.
Well, and there's another comic that picks up where she's been picked up by the Predators, and
Yeah.
she's, like, piling out with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Star Wars Legacy is up there for me as licensed. I like the IDW Transformers stuff from the early aughts, but
Yeah, I'm going to say Marvel Transformers.
Oh,
That's the comic that I grew up reading. Like when
Yeah.
I was a little kid, Adam and I got Transformers and G.I. Joe.
yeah.
And those were the two comics. And I always liked Transformers better.
Yeah. Well, it's got robots in it.
Yeah. And when IDW launched Transformers
Versus G.I. Joe?
No.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
those that
Which
series
is
go back in the
awesome.
Marvel. They did 2 Transformers versus G.I.
Yeah.
Joe miniseries.
Well, no, I meant the new IDW one with the crazy art.
Yeah, I don't know if I can handle
love
that.
it.
It's a little bit too much for me.
It's so
But
cool.
it was like Transformers like relaunch or rebirth or something like that. There was some subtitle on it, but basically it was issue 81 to 100 of that Marvel series that ended in issue 80.
Yeah.
And it was an awesome capstone to the series. And like, we talked about the first 12 issues on the show, which wasn't necessarily the best part of that series. It got a lot better as it went on. But still to this day, it's my favorite, and I can still read those old issues and relive my memories of them from when I was a kid and really enjoy them.
I reading those for the first time for the show, like I love the shit out of those. So I could see where even if it gets better, like how that
so
could
much
be
better.
Amazing. That could be just such a cool series. I've been meaning to continue reading those.
Spoiler alerts for something 25 years old. Maybe not quite that long, but anyway, at one point in the series, there's like Unicron is coming
Right.
for the first time, and Optimus Prime is like, there's no way that we can beat him by ourselves. Autobots and Decepticons have to work together, and Decepticons are like, we're gonna kill you guys, and Optimus Prime is like, all right, we surrender. All the Autobots surrender. You win. We are now your Decepticons win.
Yeah.
That's it. Game over. Now can we go please fight the giant like alien god that's going to destroy us all? And it's such an awesome moment
Cool.
when Optimus Prime like lays down his arms.
Wow. He like takes his whole arms off? I didn't know he could do that.
Actually, he has like some Autobot symbol that he puts on the ground, and then Scorponok crushes it, and it's a cool thing. I like it.
If you're collecting Transformers, they recently re-released a Rat Trap Transformer, which I almost bought the other day from Beast Wars. Just in case you care.
I loved Beast Wars, but Rat Trap is not the first
He
character that I
is
would
the
get.
worst character in the show.
But he was one of the most loved.
He was. I don't understand why, because he had the worst voice. No offense to the voice actor. They probably made him do that.
In fact, I think in the original third-person shooter video game,
Well, he was one of the characters you could play as, for sure.
Yeah,
Because you could
and there
also
were
play
only,
as
like,
Cheetah
4 of
and
them.
Rhinox.
Cheetor.
Cheetor. Whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
but
Dumb.
the demo version that I played over and over and over was just Rat Trap.
So, Cade, real quick, do you have a favorite licensed comic?
Yeah, so I'm going to say the one that I think is the best quality of the two I like, and then I'm going to say which one is my favorite.
Cool.
The one that I like that I think is of the best quality is the Dark Tower
Ooh, yeah.
comic books. They're very critically acclaimed, and
Gunslinger Born.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they are great. And you know, the whole like Stephen King permission or blessing
Yeah.
helps too. But then I think my favorite has been some of the Warcraft comics.
Oh, really?
But again, I'm a Warcraft
I mean,
nerd,
as
so
a fan though, like they work as licensed comics because, like, I know you're a huge fan of the video games and stuff. Like, sometimes
Yeah, well,
licensed comics aren't all that hot.
there are.
Well, keep in mind that Cade has pitched Space Ghost on the show.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to call
what
your
is-
taste into question because I don't. You enjoy what you like, Kate, and we love having you on the show.
Yep.
Wow. You know what? And that's the thing is, like, we joke about this all the time, where it's like taste and whatnot. But like, I really don't give a shit about what other people read because I don't have to read it.
Yeah.
I'm reading what I'm reading.
Unless we vote for it on the show, and then
Yeah.
you have to read it. But no, what I'm saying is that one of the things I appreciate about Cade is that he is very, very forgiving of his media and willing to like things that I would never be willing to like. And like, I really
Fair.
appreciate that
I
about
mean,
them. I
it's-
think that's a
also-
really good quality.
I agree.
The Buffy comics are really
Yeah.
good, as can be evidenced by season 10 starting now.
Yeah.
Um,
I was curious about World of Warcraft because I never heard anything about the comics, but I know they sold really well, and I just
It was-
assumed it was because of the license.
what pulled me in the first place was actually the manga series that took off before the comic series. They published little digests, and there were 3 digests that told a complete story of these characters that would later then go on to be in World of Warcraft.
Oh, that's
And,
cool.
be propped up during the Burning Crusade. There are some elements of the ongoing comic series that are shaping the game, but we have yet to meet the characters in game that are shaping it. And of course, Blizzard is very tight-lipped about some of their lore, where they're like,
Yeah.
we can't tell you that yet, but when we do, it will be awesome.
It was Wildstorm for a long time, right? The World of Warcraft comics?
It might have been.
Because I
I'm not
know
sure.
that like Wildstorm was doing a lot of license work for DC because they were the ones doing the Gears of War comic, and I think the the
For a long time, Blizzard's head of lore was actually Richard Knack of Dragonlance fame,
oh, okay.
or Knock. I don't remember.
Knaak.
Yes.
However
And
you
I
say
have
that.
a lot of his Dragonlance novels, which I really like. And so he kind of took over shaping their lore along with Blizzard employee Krit Smetson, who's now head of lore and does so many of the voices in Warcraft. Like, even to this day, I will go back and do old content and be like, hey, this guy's voiced by Metzen. Hey, this guy is too. As is this guy. Like,
I love it when they run out of voice actors on video games. It's like this one guy is everyone in Skyrim.
yeah.
That's the best part of Skyrim. And by best, I mean worst.
But the World of Warcraft miniseries that explain, like, that go really in depth into different parts of the lore, I really like. They had one recently, well, not recently, but towards the beginning, called Ashbringer,
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
which told the story of the magical sword that is now unobtainable to players, but some people have it from 10 years ago when you could get it. And
That's nutty to me.
it's
That was
Good deal.
real nutty in my head. That's crazy.
and it's pretty awesome. I like that, through that medium they can tell stories they wouldn't normally tell.
Yeah,
So
very cool.
Awesome.
Did we get other listening questions on Twitter? I don't know how to use that.
I do not
so-
believe that we did.
Okay.
So we should move on to recommendations
Yeah, let's do
before
it.
we hit hour 3 of this episode.
Yeah.
Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Go for it.
Boom.
Lazarus, the time has come. That's not a subtitle. I'm just saying
Is this
the
a
time has
Lazarus
come
miniseries I've
to
never heard of?
recommend Lazarus by Greg Rucka and et al.
is the third trade out?
I believe so.
If it's not, it's soon.
Yeah, but I would
like
recommend the
issue-
first two.
13 or 14 is coming out in January.
All right, well, the first two is 1 through 9,
Yep.
regardless of what Image's website says about it being 1 through 8.
That is true.
God, Image, you have a terrible website. Please fix that.
Oh my
immediately.
god! Every single week when I go to look for new picks, I'm like, this website sucks. I hate it. It's also their marketplace. They're trying to sell me stuff on there.
Yeah,
Get out of town.
and for a lot of us, that's where we get our information is
Yeah.
from their website.
Yeah, get out of town.
So do you want to say anything else about Lazarus Brandt?
We've talked of it before.
Okay.
I feel like I don't need to say anything.
Badass assassin chick in the future.
Yes. I said I didn't have to say anything more about it, Cade.
Well, I did.
All right. Cade, what do you got?
So I brought a book that we used to talk about all the time, but we have not mentioned in a really long time. And this is Powers, Who Killed Retro Girl by Brian Michael Bendis and Michael A. Von Oeming.
Soon to be a miniseries on our regular show.
Something.
Yeah, soon to be a TV series, or
Yeah.
so we hope. Okay, so regardless of what Joe says about how this book ends up, I've actually been reading the new one and I like it. The Bureau is the relaunch of it, and it pulled me back into wanting to reread Powers, and that's always an awesome feeling when you're like, oh, do you remember what used to be awesome and can still hold up? And so that's my pitch. It's been pitched by a few people before, and it's about it's a detective story in a world of superheroes. Like you do. There's a lot of them like that now, but
This was the first. or amongst the first.
So, I'm sorry. As you're pitching this, I'm scrolling through Twitter because I don't know how to use it, so I never look at it, which means I've missed, like, all of this crazy chard love that I've been getting recently about my beard, specifically from Brandon Hill, who has a hashtag that is hashtag numba spelled with an A, one chard fan. I'm just seeing this for the first time right now. That's a hashtag, and I didn't know about it. Well, thank you. No one else can use that but Brandon. That's official. That's law. That's lore.
I'm going to get on Twitter just to
Nope.
post with it.
Podcast law.
That's podcast law. I will ban you from Twitter.
Wow.
I have that power. I don't.
I wish somebody did.
Well, they've banned it. They've banned me from Twitter by making it too complicated. I don't know how it works. Anyway, sorry to cut you off, Cade, but that was making me laugh too hard.
Oh, no, that's fine. I mean, this book has been pitched a number of times on the show.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. It's well done Bendis work. It's a lot of it is what got him the job at Marvel that he took off from.
Yeah, I love the art in this too. I'm a big Avon Oming fan. So
Yeah, me too. I've pitched a bunch of his stuff that was not Bendis related on the show before.
Hammer of the Gods being one of them. Yeah.
I love that book still.
He's writing a series, Mice Templar. That is that is about mice
That are Templars.
that are Templars.
I would have never guessed.
I know nothing else.
Do
about
they
the
fight
series.
mouse assassins?
I actually don't know.
Violence.
I have no idea.
It's not the automatic assumption that all Templars fight assassins.
Well, they did though. That's
Well,
where
yes,
the
I
word
know.
assassin comes from, because it comes from
Yes, I know.
hash, like marijuana, because they'd get really high and then they'd assassinate people. It was hash, they were the hashashin,
They were,
which means assassin.
Yeah.
When you translate it, that's real.
I-
I didn't make that up.
I
That's
played
a
that
thing.
game too. I know
It's
the.
not even in the game.
Yes, it is.
They don't talk about the hashashin.
I think they talk about it at the very beginning of the first game.
I don't think so.
They don't talk about the hash part, but they do say
Okay.
our name is Hush.
Well, I mean, I remember that specifically because when I was a freshman in college, I had a history teacher called Dr. Bazemore, and she was like very animated. She also wore blue mascara, which I've never seen on another human being before or since. Like her eyelashes were blue. But she was like very animated teacher, and I remember her recanting that. That's where that word came from. Very vividly. I have very few memories. That's one of them.
Cool beans.
Anyway.
Because
Haley.
our ancestors got doped up and killed people.
Yeah, I suppose.
So what do you got, Kaylee?
I am bringing the death novellas, which are like sort of a branch off of the Sandman series, which I absolutely adore. Follows his older sister, Death, and her time spent on Earth. And I really enjoy it. I think it has a lot of introspective sort of bits about it. It's a very Neil Gaiman-y work. Which is always a good thing in my book. And so I'm recommending The High Cost of Living and The Time of Your Life.
Cool.
Very cool. Do you have to have read Sandman?
No.
Before this?
Nope.
Does it help?
It does help. But Death is a very strong character of her own.
Cool.
So,
You read this after you read Sandman?
I'm still one trade away from finishing Sandman. I've been
Oh
working on
my
it for 2
God.
years.
I get my
I
question.
have a problem where I can't read a book if I don't own it, and I'm always poor. So
Why can't you read a book if you don't own it?
it bothers me. It just really bothers. It's why I haven't
Just
read.
borrow a book. Just go to a library.
No, it's why I haven't read Game of Thrones yet.
Just
Because
go to a library.
I'm banned from the library. I have like $100 worth of late fees.
This is where the fear stems from. I've found it. So you read this after you'd read at least the first trade of
Yeah.
Sandman, though. Okay. I was curious if you had started Sandman with this.
Yeah.
Anyway, cool.
Yes.
Toby.
So last week, Multiversity number 5 came out. Thunderworld with the one true Captain Marvel and the Marvel family. And this gave me a hankering for Captain Marvel, so I'm going to pitch a book I've pitched a couple times before, Shazam and the Monster Society of Evil by Jeff Smith. And this is a really
I thought we
awesome...
read this on the show, did we not?
No, I've pitched it a bunch of times, but we have
okay.
not picked it. So
In
I'm
my
going to pitch it again.
In my brain, we talked
Maybe you
about
should
this.
just pitch the real Captain Marvel.
No, sorry. Never going to happen. Never.
Well,
This
he's
is
not
why we're
pitching
not
Captain
friends.
Marvel. He's pitching Shazam,
Well, I guess that's right.
Starring
that-
Captain Marvel
starring
not-
the guy with the red
And
jumpsuit
also,
and the cape. Shazam.
Mary Marvel, and Mr. Mind and Dr. Savannah and all your favorite Captain Marvel characters.
Tawny the Tiger.
Yeah,
Tawny Tiger.
Talkie Tiger.
Talkie Tiger. Whatever.
But
The Tiger.
it's a great, fun 4-issue miniseries by the creator of Bone. It's super lighthearted. It's super fun.
Yeah.
And it's just a really good series. And I wish the DC would put out more books like this.
Yeah, for sure. And it is colored by the illustrious Steve Haymaker, who went back and recolored all of Bone as well. And so
Yep.
colors are absolutely gorgeous.
And I believe he also colored Wrestle,
Yeah, probably, yeah.
which we talked about on the show.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Which
Shazam
I read in
and the
black and
Monster
white,
Society
so I
of
don't
Evil.
know. Yeah, I don't know. So, very cool. So I brought an image book, surprising no one. But I brought an image book that the sixth issue of which came out yesterday or today of the release of the recording. And the trade does not come out until the end of January, the 24th, but I can't wait that long to pitch the book. I need to pitch it now because I love this series. And this series absolutely blew me away in the first issue by having it be like a 40-page issue with no ads. And it was dense and beautiful and fantastic. And it's written by one of my favorite creators, Robert Kirkman. And this is Outcast.
I haven't even heard
and
about
by
this
the
book.
looks of people around the room, they do not know this series. Brand, do you know this one?
I know of it. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, so this is an exorcist story. And there's a guy who basically is like... He did not... I don't know that he served time, but I think that he kind of has been labeled as a criminal essentially for, I believe, beating his wife is what the official town story of this event is. But it's made pretty clear through images in the first issue that that was not the case, that his wife was in some way possessed by a demon, or like there was something that happened there, and he had an altercation with her that ended with him essentially like exorcising this woman, and that is his wife or girlfriend, and but I mean, like, no one believed him, obviously, and so he kind of is this like town black sheep outcast, and he's real down on his luck, and he doesn't really talk to anyone, and his wife left with his kid, and all this kind of horrible shit happened to him. But this preacher comes into town, or is been there the whole time. It's been a while since I've read a lot of the beginning of the series, but this preacher essentially befriends him and is like, look, I need help exorcising demons because something's going on, and like I can't do this by myself anymore. And you get kind of a like passing of the torch mentality from the preacher. Like, I'm not going to be able to do this forever. I need someone who's going to be able to pick up my stead. And there's also a very fascinating like character who may or may not be demon possessed or a master of demons or something, and he keeps continually showing up, and you find out that the main character, the reason he was able to exorcise his wife was because at some point in his childhood his mother was possessed, and now she's in a coma because he failed in an exorcism or something. There's a lot going on in this series, and it's very dark, it's very oppressive. It is a fantastic horror book in the tradition of movies like The Exorcist, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and, you know, any movie that has the word exorcism in it. And I'm a huge fan of that kind of stuff. I really love it. It's why I love Constantine. It's why I loved the movie Constantine, because it opens with an exorcism, and I was like, I'm hooked. It's why I like a lot of, you know, kind of demons and magic, and like that Christian tradition of hell, and kind of the priests as this, like, soldiers in the forefront war on demon possession, and it's good, and the art is absolutely amazing.
I don't know why we don't have a war on demon possession in America.
Well, it's probably
because I mean, all the other wars that we've had on things have been so successful.
It's probably because it's just not really that much of an issue at this point. I mean,
everybody's possessed at this point.
Right.
Like, we don't worry about it.
We lost the war on demon possession,
Yeah.
but we don't even know about it because. What is it? The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing you he doesn't exist. Was that the quote?
Hooah! Oh wait.
Yeah. Oh wait. Yeah. Yeah, but I love the series. It blew me away in the first issue. It was like, It's $2.99 book. I read it and I was like, holy shit, that was long. And I like went back and counted all the pages. And I was like, that was 40 pages. And I was like, there were no ads in that book. Like, Image,
Nice.
you know how to sell me on a first issue.
That was Skybound, though, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, but it's still, I mean, Skybound is an imprint of Image because it's the line that Robert Kirkman edits, but it is still published by Image. As far as I know, that's how it works. But the first trade will be at $9.99 coming out in January, and so it's the first 6 issues. So pick it up; it's gonna be sweet. And most of these are out of print, so you'll have to find them digitally or wait for the trade, which is unfortunate, but
It's only unfortunate if we pick it.
yeah. Well, for anyone that wants to read it, it's phenomenal. So everyone should definitely check it out. I really, really, really love it. I think this. I don't know if I'm going out on a limb, but I think that this is Kirkman's strongest work as a writer, and I love Invincible. So
Good deal.
there we go. It's out
Brant?
there.
What do you want to
Brantley.
read?
Shazam.
Shazam! Cade?
I want to pick Lazarus, but I want to talk about the third trade too, which isn't out yet.
Well, then throw it.
We can talk about all three.
Well, I mean, it's not done yet.
Oh.
I'm saying, vote for something else. Throw it.
Death.
All right.
I'm going to vote for Outcast.
I am going to vote for Lazarus.
I knew you were going to do that. I knew you were going to do that. You get this look in your eye when I'm like, I can make Chard actually make a decision. And you get this like excited look in your face like, I'm going to fuck with them.
It's the only thing that brings him joy.
Oh man, this is a tough call. I mean, not really, because I can't make anything a tie, so I have to vote for Lazarus, right? Is
Well, no,
that-
you can vote for Lazarus. You can vote for
Death or Shazam.
or
Wait,
Shazam.
didn't Lazarus already get 2?
No.
No. Oh, it's only in 1. Oh, I see.
The only way you could make a tie is by voting for Powers. Because then
Yeah.
That
everything's
is
got
true.
1.
Yeah, that's true. I can't vote for Powers, which is sad because that's a great book.
I can see the pressure mounting.
Yeah,
Beads of sweat.
I know.
slowly
It's so hard.
dripping
It's
down
like,
your
do
forehead.
I want to read Shazam and Monster Society of Evil? Not really. Do I want to read Death? Not a big fan of Sandman. Not really. But I do love Lazarus, so I will vote for Lazarus because I'm a huge fan of that. And you can go get the oversized hardcover that collects the first 2 trade paperbacks with graphic design on the cover done by the illustrious Eric Troutman, who did all the graphic design for the whole book. But he also designed the wraparound cover with the like cool, like parts of it are shiny and parts of it aren't and stuff. And it's phenomenal, and everyone should go look at it because it's beauty.
He
It's a beauty and
also
mold.
designed View from the Gutters logo, which is
And-
also phenomenal.
Yeah, our new logo and our new business cards. So
Which, if you meet us in person, we will totally give you one.
we'll hand you one. Just one. You can't have any more than that.
you can have a second one if you
no.
meet me, but I'm going to charge you a nickel.
Right.
First one's free.
I don't think that's how business cards are supposed to work. But yeah, so read Lazarus. I'm very excited because I've pitched this book personally before. So
Awesome.
I'm very excited. Let's read Lazarus, get excited for issue 100, and continue to send in listener questions. Hopefully we answered them all.
We've actually had 4 people pitch Lazarus.
Have we? Because you've done it, right?
I've done it. Matt has done it. You've
I've done it, no.
And so now Brant has done it.
Boom.
Well, Brant had to do it for it to get picked.
That's true.
It's just how things work.
That's how it works.
That's true.
But yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you guys next time. Bye.
Happy Yuletide,
Yeah.
Miss Kwanzaa.
Happy holidays.
Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa. We'll see you in the new year, right? Is that how this works out? Not quite.
No, December 30th.
We got one more before the new year. All right. Well, whatever. Bye.
That means we can be drinking on the next episode.
That does
'cause
mean
it's
that.
New Year's.
Yes. Sure. We can do that.
All right.
I think we're also planning on drinking for episode 100, so you may get 2 drunk casts back to back, but we'll see. Until
will
next
tell.
time. Yeah.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to View from the Gutters. I hope our recommendations have inspired you to go out and find some new comics you'll enjoy. Join us next time for a discussion of our selected title, but like every week, we encourage you to read all of the recommended books. In the meantime, please leave us an iTunes review. It really does help new listeners find the show. You can also like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at ViewFRTHGutters. Feel free to email us at contact@viewfromthegutters.com. Please send us any questions, comments, or recommendations you might have. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as we post new videos every week. And thanks again for listening. And as always, keep reading.